So OnePlus certainly didn't let that 2020 funk bring it down at all, pumping out more phones than ever before, including the excellent OnePlus Nord, a serious rival to Google's Pixel 4a 5G that costs a buttload less. And seemingly not content to stop right there, a couple of months later we got this wee blighter, the OnePlus Nord N10, which shaves a further 50 quid off that asking price. So for just 329 bob you can have yourself a 5G ready phone, although you do have to make some sacrifices to get that lower asking price. Now I've used the OnePlus Nord N10 as my full-time personal smartphone for a few days now, and here's my review so you know how it stacks up to the original Nord as well as other budget-friendly 5G smartphones. And for more on the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notification bell. Cheers! So the design of the OnePlus Nord N10 certainly ain't anything special. Here in the UK, this midnight ice coloration is your only option, and that's basically just a posh way of saying very, very dark blue. It is a basic plastic backing here on the back of the Nord N10 5G, and it does flex ever so slightly under pressure, although not to a troublesome degree. And you know, I've treated this thing like dog shit. I've actually dropped it, and so far, touch wood, no major scratches or scuffs to speak of, just a few very light little nicks down towards the bottom around the edges. And while you sadly don't get a pre-installed screen protector here on the Nord N10, that Gorilla Glass 3 screen coating certainly seems to be doing its job very nicely. So overall, we're talking a fairly straightforward and unexciting design, but at least the OnePlus Nord N10 seems durable enough to cope with everyday existence. And I do love that rear-mounted fingerprint sensor, which is definitely an endangered species these days. It's easy to use, and it's usually super responsive, although sometimes, well, more on that in a bit. Now, while the fancy pants flagship phone, the OnePlus 8T, came rocking a good bit of Android 11 straight out of the box, here on the OnePlus Nord N10, sadly it is the older Android 10 OS, plus it's also the previous generation of OnePlus's own Oxygen OS launcher. And that is a massive shame, especially as OnePlus isn't committing to 2 years of OS updates here with the Nord N10. So while we will get an update to Android 11 and Oxygen OS 11 eventually, right now you don't get some of those fresher features like the streamlined notification support and the jazzy new power menu, or those redesigned OnePlus menus and apps for easier one-handed play. And at least you do still get all those classic OnePlus features on here, like the Zen mode and of course the fantastic customization options. In fact, the only classic feature that has been culled for the Nord N10 is that alert slider. And that was always quite handy when you're about to jump into like a business meeting or something, although obviously that doesn't really happen anymore, so yeah. But the entire time I've been testing out the OnePlus Nord N10, I gotta say it was not a happy bunny, with one recurrent bug which drove me absolutely nuts. You see, occasionally the phone would just freeze up for no reason when I tried unlocking it. The fingerprint sensor wouldn't work, and even when I did get it unlocked using the face recognition, the screen wouldn't register my pokes or swipes for about 5 or 10 seconds, until the phone magically remembered it was supposed to actually be doing shit. I'm speaking with a lot of other people who've been reviewing the OnePlus Nord N10. It seems like a handful of them have experienced the exact same issue, while others have had other bugs instead, like their phone not actually hibernating ever. And on the flip side to that, some tech journalists that I've spoken with haven't had any issues at all with their OnePlus Nord N10, so it seems like just a handful of units have been affected. So fingers crossed if you snaffle one, you won't have any problems either, but it's definitely worth bearing in mind. For your storage needs, you've got a very respectable 128 gigs of internal space, but the real headline here is that you actually can expand that using micro SD memory cards up to 512 gigs in size, unlike those more premium OnePlus phones. And other standard Android features that you would expect to find on here, like full Google Pay support, work a charm. Now, while the original Nord phone served up a gorgeous AMOLED screen, the N10 scales that back to a 6.49-inch IPS panel. Visuals are still sharp and rather punchy, although you only have limited control over the output besides a basic temperature scaler. It is a perfectly fine display for enjoying movies and shows, although the N10 only appears to have Widevine L3 support for Netflix right now, so you won't be able to get any gorgeous HD playback on there just yet. And hopefully that's a situation that'll change really, really soon. And you've got yourself a stereo speaker arrangement here, although of course that earpiece speaker is significantly quieter than the one at the other end. But who really cares, because the Nord N10 heralds a glorious return of our long lost friend, the headphone jack, which was missing in action on the OnePlus handsets for a good long while. And I also had absolutely no issues whatsoever streaming music to speakers or headphones using a good bit of Bluetooth 5.1. Now, it's Qualcomm's Snapdragon 690 chipset with its built-in X51 5G modem that provides the smarts here, and that's backed by 6 gigs of RAM. Of course, considering you're still paying over 300 quid for this bad boy, I was kind of hoping you'd still get that Snapdragon 765G chipset like the original Nord, and like a lot of similarly priced rivals like the Realme X50 5G. But But you know what, it really doesn't matter, because besides those awful bugs, the OnePlus Nord N10 ran as well as could be hoped. Apps load up quickly and games play with a graceful smoothness even when you knock those graphics settings right up. And that's helped along by that fanatic gaming mode, which beats down any background activity while also blocking any pesky notifications and the like. No worries on the touch responsiveness here either when playing fast-paced games like Call of Duty. And of course it's great that you've still got that 5G future-proof in here on the Nord N10 as well, even if it is just basic sub-6 as you kind of expect at this budget price point. But that said, of course, OnePlus has some stiff competition when it comes to budget 5G phones right now from the likes of Xiaomi with its Mi 10T Lite, which costs an incredible 229 quid here in the UK. I actually picked it up for 179 in Black Friday. So if you are dead set on having that 5G support but on a limited budget, well, definitely shop around because there are plenty of options now. And in fact, I'm actually working on my roundup of the best budget 5G smartphones right now, so stay tuned, that should be going live in a few days. Touch wood, fingers crossed, etc. As for battery life, well, you actually get a slightly bigger 4300 mAh effort here on the Nord N10 versus the original OnePlus Nord, and I made it through even the most crazy full-on days with plenty of juice left in the tank. Drain is thankfully minimal when the phone's not actually in use, and even at the end of a fairly intensive day with around 5 to 6 hours of screen on time, I still tended to have around 20 to 30% juice left in the tank. And in more good news, you get that same super fast Warp Charge 30T tech as the original OnePlus Nord. That's 30 watt fast charging, so you'll have a full battery again in about an hour or so at the plug. So let's finish up with that quad lens rear camera, which sports different hardware to the original Nord. The main difference here is that you get a 64 megapixel primary sensor, although photos are shot at 16 meg by default, with pixel binning to help produce a more balanced, brighter looking snap. Detail levels are somewhat lacking when you view back your photos on a bigger screen, with soft or grainy results at times. And that's especially when you're shooting indoors. But the OnePlus Nord N10 can handle HDR situations commendably well, rarely oversaturating a shot, while colours are fairly close to what you would see with the naked eye. And while that auto mode struggles at dusk and other low light scenarios, OnePlus's Nightscape mode definitely helps out there, producing sharper, brighter photos. Once you get past the primary lens though, you've basically got the same 8 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, 2 megapixel monochrome lens and 2 megapixel macro sensor as the original OnePlus Nord. That ultra wide angle snapper produces darker, warmer pics, so it's only really useful in strong daylight, but it is always another option when needed. And I wouldn't really bother with that macro lens, to be perfectly honest. You'll get better looking results with the primary lens more often than not. For your video needs, you can capture Ultra HD footage at 30 frames per second with a cinewide option for more poncy looking home movies. Now 4K video looks sharp enough, although you will have to be careful not to shoot against bright skies as you will definitely get some oversaturation. Audio clarity was acceptable even at a distance, but OnePlus's usually great image stabilization is sadly missing in action, so definitely don't wander about and record at the same time. And then last up, there's that solo 16 megapixel front facing cam, which again is fine for your basic selfie needs. Skin tones are definitely somewhat lacking, especially when you're shooting in bright daylight, and pics do once again look a bit soft when blown up. But the portrait mode works a charm and it'll do the job for simple shareable shots. So that's my final review on the OnePlus Nord N10 after using it as my full-time smartphone. And I gotta say, if you can afford the extra 50 quid and the original Nord is actually available in your area, I'd definitely jump on board with that instead, because much better specs, that gorgeous AMOLED screen, I just enjoyed it much more. Otherwise, you've got alternative options like the Xiaomi Mi 10T Lite and of course that Realme X50 5G here in the UK as well. So definitely go check out my full reviews of those to see what I thought of them. Stay tuned for that best budget 5G smartphone roundup, and it'd be great to hear your own thoughts if you've been using the Nord N10 or any other budget 5G smartphone to see which is your own personal favourite. And for more on the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers!